She didn't knock. The front door swung open like she still lived here, like her fingerprints weren't wiped clean from every surface 2 months ago. She walked in holding someone else's hand, and everyone at the table turned to look at me. Not her, not him, me. Because no one in that room, not my sister, not my mother, not even my 90-year-old grandmother who can barely hear thunder, knew we were divorced. She wore red. She never wore red. Said it made her feel like she was trying too hard. Said it was not her. Well, tonight, she was trying hard. The guy she brought, I didn't recognize him. Not right away. He was taller than me. Had one of those sharp beards that look like they need a software update every day. He smiled at me like we were going to play tennis later. And I just sat there, with a forkful of overcooked carrots halfway to my mouth. Frozen. Everyone else. They weren't frozen. They were melting. Their stares, their whispers, their polite gasps. All of it poured over me like hot wax. My mom stood up. "Oh, you made it," she said, not knowing. Not knowing anything. She pulled out a chair. The chair next to mine. I should have said something. I should have spoken. Instead, I choked down the carrots. Then I looked at her, Mara. She hadn't even looked at me yet. She was too busy pretending to laugh at whatever beard guy whispered in her ear. Too busy pretending like this was normal. Like crashing a family dinner she wasn't part of anymore, wasn't nuclear-level disrespect. And then it happened. I don't even know what triggered it. Maybe it was the way my grandma reached out for her hand and said, "There's my girl." Maybe it was the empty seat beside me. Maybe it was the realization that I hadn't moved when she walked in. No flinch, no pain, just silence. But her eyes finally found mine. And everything in her expression, the smugness, the victory, the game she thought she won, it all cracked. I saw it. In one brutal second, she remembered what this house smelled like after rain. She remembered the Sunday mornings. The stupid blanket with the hole we never fixed. My nervous pacing before job interviews. How I always burnt the toast. And how, no matter what, I never stopped trying. Her hand slipped from his. She blinked too fast. She swallowed hard. And in front of 12 people, 4 generations, and a table full of chicken and lies, she realized what she lost. She didn't sit down. That's the part that sticks with me the most. Mara, who always made herself at home no matter where she was, didn't sit. Her legs went stiff like she wasn't sure if this was real or some vivid anxiety dream where she showed up to a party uninvited. Dax, I heard someone say his name, finally, didn't notice. He just plopped down like he belonged there. Took a piece of cornbread off the platter, asked my cousin if there was gluten in it, and winked at my niece. She's 13. She didn't laugh. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I wanted to, but my mouth was dry and my fingers were trembling under the table. All I could do was watch her freeze in that doorway while my family tried to play catch-up in real time. Then came the questions. My aunt leaned toward me, whispering, "Is that the consultant guy you mentioned?" My brother, who already had too much wine, whispered not so softly, "Yo, is she serious right now?" And my mom, poor mom, she was just smiling, holding out a plate, still thinking everything was fine. I watched Mara scan the table. Slowly, her eyes landed on the name card next to mine. It had her name on it. I made it 2 nights ago. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. Stupidity, definitely. I told myself she wouldn't show up. But deep down, I must have hoped. Her eyes lingered on it, then shifted to me. I think she expected me to get up. Cause a scene. Maybe throw a glass or storm out. That's the kind of man she always said I was. Soft until I explode. But I didn't explode. I didn't even blink. I just reached forward, picked up the name card, and calmly folded it in half. Then in half again. Then again. Until it was a tight little square I tucked into my palm and dropped under the table. That's when her mask cracked for good. Her posture collapsed slightly. She took a step back. Dax looked up, confused, and said, "You okay, babe?" And for the first time ever, in public, no less, she didn't answer him. Instead, she turned to my mother and muttered, "Sorry. I shouldn't have come," like a child apologizing for breaking a vase. She turned to leave, but I stood up. "Actually," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I thought possible, "you should stay." Everyone froze. Even Dax stopped chewing. "Stay," I repeated. "There's something we all should talk about." And that's when I pulled the envelope from my pocket. The same one she dropped off at my apartment a week ago. Unopened. Unread. I held it up. She recognized it immediately. Her face drained. Funny thing about legal documents, I said, slowly unfolding it. You shouldn't send the same copy twice. What are you doing, Emery? She whispered, barely audible. I'm telling the truth, I said. And you're going to listen, because they deserve to know it too. She took a breath like she was about to beg, but I wasn't finished. Because if she thought the worst thing I could do was fall apart, she had no idea what I'd been planning. The silence that followed was brutal. Not dramatic, not cinematic, brutal. The kind that scrapes your skin off with every second that passes. Every pair of eyes was either on me or on her. No one looked at Dax. He was background noise now. Static. A commercial break during a show no one wanted to pause. Mara stood there like she'd been caught in a spotlight. Except it wasn't guilt on her face. Not entirely. It was panic. The way someone looks when a carefully stacked tower starts to tremble and they realize, too late, they built it on sand. I unfolded the envelope slowly. I didn't do it for drama. I did it because my fingers were trembling and I didn't want to drop it. My mouth felt like it was filled with glue, but I had to speak. Because I'd been silent for too long. Silent when she started pulling away. Silent when the lies dripped between us like a leaky faucet. Silent when she told me I was the safest mistake she ever made. But not tonight. She sent me this, I said, holding up the letter. Last week. Told me it was final. That we were done. That she was moving on, and I should, too. Everyone just stared. My mom looked from Mara to me like she'd suddenly realized she'd missed an entire season of our lives. My sister's hand went to her mouth. My cousin mouthed, "What the hell?" Mara stepped forward, her voice tight. "Emery, please. Not here." "Why not here?" I snapped, louder than I meant to. My voice cracked. "Why not at the table where you used to hold my hand under the napkin? Why not in front of the people who still ask if you're coming to brunch?" She went pale. Dax reached for her arm, but she pulled it away. "You want to know why she left?" I said, turning to my family. "It wasn't because we drifted apart. It wasn't because we wanted different things. It's because she found someone who made her feel new. Someone who didn't wear the same jacket for 7 years. Someone who said the right things, probably rehearsed in the mirror." "Stop," she whispered. But I didn't. "I'm not the victim here," I continued. "Not anymore. Because I found out something she didn't want me to know. And tonight's the perfect night to share it." Mara's eyes went wide. "Emery," she said again. "Don't." But I reached into my other pocket and pulled out the folded photos. 3 of them. Crisp. Fresh. Time-stamped. Her car. Dax's apartment. 2 wine glasses by the window. Her coat on the floor. I wasn't trying to humiliate her. I was trying to free myself. While she was telling me she needed space, I said slowly. She was already living in his. Gasps. Real ones. Not the fake sitcom kind. She told me she wanted to heal. But she didn't want healing. She wanted applause. She wanted to be told she was brave. That leaving her husband made her powerful. But power doesn't come from running. It comes from honesty. And that's what this dinner is going to have now. Finally. Mara stared at the photos like they were weapons. Maybe they were. But I wasn't done yet. I looked directly at Dax. "And you," I said, "you're not just a guy who swooped in. You're the guy who sat across from me at the holiday party and told me how lucky I was. Remember that? You said, 'Hold on to her, man. She's rare.'" Dax shifted in his chair. No more smirk. "You're right," I said. "She was rare. But not for the reasons you think." I turned back to the table, my voice softer now. "I'm not asking you to hate her. I'm not even asking you to pick sides. I just want the pretending to stop." Mara was trembling. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. Just a shallow breath. And then my grandmother, nearly blind, nearly deaf, looked up from her soup and said, perfectly clear, "So, who's ready for dessert?" Everyone froze. And then, I laughed. For the first time in months, I actually laughed. I didn't expect to laugh. I really didn't. It came out of nowhere, sharp and sudden, like the pressure finally burst after weeks of squeezing my chest. My grandmother's deadpan comment cut through the tension like a scalpel. It was absurd, ridiculous, perfect. And for a second, I almost forgot how wrecked I felt. But Mara didn't laugh. Neither did Dax. And neither did anyone else. Because while I was releasing something, maybe even reclaiming something, she was unraveling. She looked around the table like the room had shifted sideways. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. Instead, she reached for the envelope I'd put down on the table. She folded it, slowly, with trembling fingers, like maybe she could somehow erase what just happened by tucking it neatly away. But paper doesn't forget. I didn't come here to cause a scene, she said finally, her voice tight and brittle. I didn't know you'd turn this into some kind of performance. Performance? I asked, raising an eyebrow. You brought a date to a dinner with my last name on the invitation. It wasn't your name, she snapped. It was a family dinner. I was part of this family. You were, I said, softer now. Until you left. That landed harder than I expected. Her eyes darted down, then over to Dax, who looked increasingly out of place, like a guy who wandered into the wrong funeral. He shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. I didn't realize you were going to ambush me in front of your whole family, she said, trying to sound firm. You always hated confrontation. I still do, I replied. But I hate lying more. And then, for the first time all evening, Dax spoke. I think this has gone far enough, he said, his voice lower than I expected, smooth, but shaky underneath. Whatever happened between you two, airing it out in front of everyone like this doesn't help. I turned to him, trying hard not to laugh again. You're right. It doesn't help. But let me ask you something, Dax. When she told you she was separated, did she also mention she still had a drawer full of my shirts? Did she tell you she still called my mom once a week to check in? That she asked me to wait? That she needed time to process? His eyes darted to Mara. She didn't answer. So I leaned in, calm but firm. She told both of us different stories. And I know you think you're the main character here, but you're just a chapter. A fast one. One she'll pretend never existed once it gets uncomfortable. Stop it, she snapped. This isn't you, Emery. No, I said. This is me when I finally stop being what you needed, quiet, convenient, invisible. I reached into my bag and pulled out the last piece. The one I didn't even plan on using. A printed email. From her work address. Dated 2 weeks before she moved out. Subject, I can't do this much longer. He still thinks we're fine. I didn't say anything. I just slid it across the table. Mara's face flushed. She didn't reach for it. Didn't deny it. She just stared at it like it was ticking. You went through my emails? She asked, her voice dangerously low. No, I said. It was forwarded to me. Accidentally. From your office account. You CC'd the wrong Emery. That's the only reason I saw it. I wasn't looking. I was just in the way. Again. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Everyone at the table sat in stunned silence. And then my sister, who had barely said a word all night, finally spoke. You always said he wasn't good enough for you, she said softly, looking straight at Mara. But look at him now, standing here, telling the truth. And you? You're just trying to spin another version of the story. Mara stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. I shouldn't have come. You didn't come for closure, I said, standing too. You came to prove to yourself that I was still broken, that you still mattered. But what you saw wasn't a performance. It was the final chapter. She looked at me, eyes glistening, mouth tight. But she didn't say a word. Then she turned, fast, and walked straight out the door, Dax scrambling after her like a man who just realized his compass was broken. The door slammed shut. The room stayed silent for a long time. Then my mother, quietly devastated, stood up to clear the plates. I sat down, finally, in the chair she used to call hers. And just before anyone else could say a word, I picked up my glass, raised it gently, and said, to truth, even when it shows up late. No one toasted back, but no one looked away either. The door had been shut for 20 minutes, but her presence still lingered in the room like perfume after someone's already gone. My family didn't know what to say, not because they were afraid, but because they were realizing they had never really seen any of this coming. And that was the part that stung the most. How good she was at curating a version of us. How good I was at helping her maintain the illusion. My mom was in the kitchen, rinsing plates a little too hard. My sister sat with her arms crossed, staring at the glass of wine she hadn't touched since Mara walked in. And my niece, bless her, just kept sneaking confused glances between me and the front door like she was waiting for the adults to tell her what the rules were now. I was still holding the envelope, the one she tried to pretend meant something formal, professional, finished. But it was none of those things. It was just paper, cold and empty, kind of like how she left me. I set it down next to my plate and finally stood up. I needed air. I stepped out onto the porch, half expecting the night to be ruined by the weight of everything, but it wasn't. It was quiet, almost peaceful. A cool breeze rattled the wind chimes. For a moment, I just stood there, trying to figure out what I was feeling. I thought it would be relief. Maybe vindication. But it wasn't. It was clarity. For the first time since she left, I wasn't waiting anymore. Not waiting for a text. Not checking if she viewed my story. Not wondering if she might show up at my door with tears and a sorry, and some recycled speech about timing and growth. That hope, the one that ate away at me in silence, was finally, brutally, gone. And in its place was something unfamiliar. Freedom. I turned around and saw my brother leaning against the doorframe, watching me. He's not the emotional type. Used to tease me for how sensitive I was in high school. But he didn't look like he had jokes tonight. "You good?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, I think so." He looked me up and down, then shrugged. "You held your ground. Didn't think you had that in you." "Neither did I admitted." He gave a small, approving nod and disappeared back inside. I took another deep breath. The wind felt different now, not just cool, but clean, like something had been scrubbed off my skin. That's when I made the decision. I wasn't going back to the apartment tonight. Not because it reminded me of her, but because it didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. The couch we picked together, the mug rack she insisted on installing at an angle, the bookshelf organized by color, it all felt like remnants of someone else's life. A museum of a relationship that died quietly behind closed doors while no one was watching. So I walked back into the dining room and made an announcement I hadn't planned. "I think I'm going to disappear for a little while." My mom turned sharply. "What do you mean disappear?" "Just take some time. Go somewhere. Be off the grid. Think without noise." "You've barely stabilized," she said. "Don't run away from this." "I'm not running," I said gently. "I'm finally moving. There's a difference." My sister looked at me for a long moment. Then she stood and walked over. "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "But somewhere that doesn't smell like memories." She hugged me. Tight. The kind of hug you give someone who's bleeding but pretending they're not. And then she said something I'll never forget. "Good. Make new ones. And this time, don't shrink to fit someone else's space." I left the dinner that night with nothing but a backpack, my car keys, and my phone set to airplane mode. And I didn't look back. Not even once. 3 weeks passed before anyone heard from me. I left no forwarding address, no cryptic notes, no "I'll be back" promises. Just gone. I drove west until the GPS lost signal and my phone battery died. I stayed in roadside motels where nobody asked for ID, small towns where the diner waitress called you Han without knowing your name. Every night, I'd fall asleep to the sound of trains passing, and for the first time in years, my dreams were empty. Not nightmares, not fantasies, just blankness. It was bliss. But what I didn't know then was that my absence had become its own story back home. My sister told me later that people started asking questions. Neighbors whispered. My mom said she kept getting texts from Mara at odd hours, messages that started polite and got stranger. "Where did he go?" turned into "he can't just vanish like this," and finally, "tell him to call me. I made a mistake." At first my family didn't respond. Then they stopped answering at all. It wasn't out of cruelty. It was because they'd seen what she'd done and they'd decided, for once, to protect me instead of her. Meanwhile, on the road, something in me was shifting. I started writing in a notebook I'd bought at a gas station, not about her, but about myself. Things I'd never dared to say out loud. Things I'd suppressed under all those quiet smiles and polite nods. I wrote about the nights she'd come home late and smell like a bar she'd never told me she visited. I wrote about the time she mocked my job to her friends when she thought I wasn't listening. I wrote about how much I hated the way I always apologized first. And somewhere between Nebraska and Utah, the writing stopped being a purge and started becoming a blueprint. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was drawing my own map. Then, one night in a rundown motel outside a national park, I opened my phone for the first time in weeks. Dozens of missed calls. Over 100 texts. Most from unknown numbers, friends of hers, maybe, or her new circle. But buried in there were messages from Mara herself. The last one, timestamped just an hour earlier, read, "I'm at your family's house. I need to talk to you. I don't know where you are, but please, please just tell me you're alive." For a long time I stared at the screen. Not angry, not even sad, just curious. Why now? Why after all of this? And why at my family's house? Then another text arrived while I was still holding the phone. "They're not telling me where you are. But I'll wait. I'll wait until you come back." I shut the phone off again. I wasn't ready. Not yet. But something about her words felt different, not rehearsed, not polished, almost desperate. And it scared me a little, because I realized for the first time, maybe she hadn't come to that dinner just to show off. Maybe she'd come to see if there was anything left of us worth salvaging. And when she saw me not break, she panicked. And now, with me gone, she had no script. The next morning, as the sun came up over the desert, I closed my notebook, zipped my bag, and for the first time in weeks, pointed the car back east. Not to run back, not to forgive, but because I wanted answers. Real ones. And this time, I wasn't the man who left quietly. I was the man coming back on his own terms. I didn't tell anyone I was returning. No texts, no surprise calls. I wanted to walk back into my world like a man slipping into a familiar coat, not to fit in, but to see if it still fit at all. I parked 4 blocks away from my family's house, not out of paranoia, but because I wanted a few quiet minutes to breathe in the air of the life I left behind. The trees were still shedding. The sky had that same gray stretch that made the afternoons feel longer than they were. Everything looked the same, but I wasn't. When I finally turned the corner and stepped onto the walkway, I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe an empty porch, maybe voices inside. But what I saw stopped me cold. She was sitting on the front steps. Mara, legs pulled up to her chest, arms wrapped around her knees, wearing one of my old sweatshirts. The green one with the frayed sleeves she used to steal when she was cold and mad, but didn't want to admit either. Her hair was messy, unstyled. No makeup, no performance. She looked like she'd fallen asleep waiting for a ride that never came. She didn't hear me at first. I stood still, taking her in, like some museum exhibit of a woman I used to know. I couldn't decide if I felt anything. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hopeful. I was just there, present. Finally, then she looked up, and everything in her face collapsed. She stood fast, too fast, nearly tripping over herself as she rushed down the stairs, as if she wasn't sure if I was real or just another hallucination her guilt had cooked up. Her mouth opened, but no words came. She just stared at me like I was the ending to a book she never finished reading. "You came back," she finally said. Her voice cracked on the second word. "Not for long," I replied. That stopped her. Her expression twisted, like she'd been hit. But she covered it quickly. "Years of emotional theater don't fade overnight. Can we talk?" she asked. I nodded. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew this needed to happen. We stepped inside. My mother wasn't home, thank God, and sat across from each other in the same room where she once said she wanted kids, where we decorated a Christmas tree that leaned too far to the left, but we kept it anyway, where we pretended we were building a future while she was already mapping an exit. "I've been thinking about everything," she began, "and I know I can't undo what I did. I know what I did was calculated." I cut in. "You knew what you were doing." She blinked. That threw her. I was confused. "No," I said. Calm. Measured. "You were selfish. There's a difference." She looked down. Her hands twisted in her lap. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she whispered. I couldn't stop thinking about you after that night. You were right. I brought him to make a point. I thought you'd break. That if I saw you crack, I could walk away and feel justified. But you didn't. And instead, I cracked. I waited. I left because I thought I was bored," she continued. "But it wasn't boredom. It was fear. You loved me so unconditionally, so gently, that it made me feel like a fraud. Like any moment, you'd realize I wasn't worth the pedestal you put me on." "You put yourself on that pedestal," I said. "I just tried to believe in it." She wiped her face with her sleeve. The tears weren't performative. They were quiet. Real. But real doesn't always equal right. "I'm not here to rewrite the past," I said. "I came back to thank my family, to move my things, to let everyone know I'm okay. That's it." Her head jerked up. "Wait, you're not staying?" "No," I said. "I'm not." And then she panicked. She stood, pacing, rambling. "But we could start again. Not the same way. I've changed, I swear. I see everything now. I'm in therapy. I talk to a coach. I've been journaling. I've been meditating. I haven't seen Dax since that night. I blocked him. I. Stop." She stopped. I stood and walked toward the door. "I didn't come back for a sequel, Mara. I came back for closure." She stepped in front of me. "Please, just tell me what I'm supposed to do." "Let me go," I said. "And then go figure out who you are when no one's watching." She looked at me like a drowning woman watching the lifeboat row away. And then I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I just walked. And for the first time in years, she was the one left wondering. 3 months passed. No dramatic texts. No unexpected knocks. No late-night apologies bleeding through voicemail. Mara had finally disappeared from my daily life. Not in bitterness, not in silence, but in acceptance. After that final conversation, she didn't chase anymore. And I didn't need to run. We had burned it all down, and now the ashes had cooled. I moved into a small place outside town. Nothing fancy, just a sunlit loft above a used bookstore, owned by a retired couple who reminded me that people could grow old and still like each other. The air smelled like ink and dust, and I found that comforting. I bought a bike. I started reading again. I even planted a basil plant that somehow refused to die under my care. A small miracle considering I once burned microwave popcorn twice in one night. Life got quiet. Not lonely, just mine again. My family came around often. My sister would bring her kid over on weekends, and we'd build Lego castles while eating ice cream for lunch. My brother helped me repaint the kitchen. Even my mom, who took everything so personally in the beginning, started laughing again. One afternoon, as we sat drinking tea, she looked at me and said, "You seem lighter." And I realized she was right. Then, one day in early spring, I saw her again. Mara. Not in some dramatic twist of fate. Not in a crowded cafe or outside my window. I saw her in a grocery store parking lot. She was getting into her car, alone. No Dax. No drama. Just her. She didn't see me at first. But then, she did. And for a long, suspended second, we simply looked at each other. She didn't flinch. Neither did I. Then, softly, she smiled. Not the old smile. Not the one that made promises she couldn't keep. But a quiet, tired, peaceful smile. One that said, "We were a chapter. That's all." And I nodded. Just once. And that was it. No need for words. No need for explanations. We both had said everything already. I drove home after that, windows down, wind in my hair, and a strange lightness in my chest. I wasn't mourning her anymore. I wasn't resenting the past. I wasn't even waiting for anything ahead. I was just here. I made dinner. I watered the basil. I put on music. And that night, I wrote one final entry in my notebook. Sometimes love ends. Not with betrayal. Not with revenge. Just truth. And when the truth is finally spoken, healing doesn't feel like fire. It feels like air. I closed the notebook, turned off the lights, and slept like a man who finally made peace with his story. The end.